MrBeast helps a homeless beggar. In the heart of the city, a place where the streets never seemed to sleep, the world moved with unrelenting speed. The hum of car engines, the hurried footsteps of passers-by, the neon lights flashing in every direction. All of it formed a constant rhythm. But within this chaos, there were those whose presence went unnoticed by most, hidden in plain sight. The winter chill had set in, biting at anyone brave enough to endure the cold. Yet, amidst the brisk winds and the busy crowds, one man sat on a forgotten corner. His face, lined with age and hardship, told the story of a life lived without comfort. His clothes were worn thin, a pair of old boots nearly falling apart. A cardboard sign sat in front of him, its simple message capturing the gravity of his reality. Homeless, hungry, anything helps. Arthur Bennett had been here for too long. It was a chilly evening when Jimmy Donaldson, better known as MrBeast, stepped into that very scene. He had just finished filming the latest in a long string of extravagant videos, his camera crew following him as they wrapped up another project. Jimmy's heart, however, was never in the spectacle or the prizes he gave away. It had always been in helping people, changing lives, and using his platform to make a real difference. As Jimmy walked past the street corner, something caught his eye. A figure hunched over, alone and vulnerable. Something in the deep, tired eyes of the man stopped Jimmy in his tracks. This wasn't part of his latest video plan, but as he approached, the impulse to help flooded over him. "Hey, sir," Jimmy called gently, crouching down to meet Arthur's gaze. "What's your name?" Arthur's voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. Arthur Bennett." The words were a stark contrast to the weight they carried. Jimmy smiled warmly, but it was the kind of smile that carried an understanding far beyond the surface. "I'm Jimmy," he said. "How long have you been out here, Arthur?" Arthur's eyes fell to the ground as he muttered, "Too long. Lost everything. My job, my home. I don't even know where it all went wrong." Jimmy's heart tightened, not out of pity, but from the realization of how fragile life could be. This wasn't just a random encounter. This was a moment that would change everything. Without a second thought, he reached into his wallet, pulled out a $100 bill, and handed it to Arthur. "Here," he said, pressing the bill into Arthur's trembling hands. "This is just the start. Stay right here. I'll be back in a bit." Arthur's eyes widened in disbelief. "Why? Why would you do this for me?" Jimmy's smile grew wider, though there was a quiet sadness in his eyes. "Because everyone deserves a second chance." An hour later, Jimmy returned, this time not just with a $100 bill, but with a full crew, a vision, and a purpose. This wasn't a stunt. This wasn't a video for views. This was about giving someone a chance, something Arthur had long forgotten how to expect. Jimmy had already arranged for food, new clothes, and a hotel room for Arthur to stay in for the night. His team of experts sprang into action, eager to help. As Arthur was helped into a warm car, his eyes welled up with tears. "I don't understand," he whispered, his voice breaking under the weight of everything he had endured. "Why are you doing all this?" Jimmy looked him in the eye, his voice steady but soft. "Because I can, and because you're worth it." Over the next few days, Arthur's life began to shift in ways he couldn't have imagined. The journey wasn't easy. Arthur had spent so many years in isolation that trusting again didn't come naturally. But Jimmy and his team were patient, knowing that true transformation took time. First, they took Arthur to a barbershop. The clippers buzzed through his hair, cutting away the years of neglect. The man who had walked into that shop was not the same one who walked out. With each trim, a new layer of confidence was revealed. Arthur caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror, and for the first time in years, he smiled. Next, Jimmy took him to a clothing store. Arthur's eyes roamed over the racks of clothes like a child in a candy store, hesitant at first. But Jimmy encouraged him to choose freely, anything he wanted. Arthur stood there, in disbelief at the opportunity. As they left the store, Arthur turned to Jimmy. "I've never had anything like this before. I don't know how to say thank you." Jimmy smiled. "You don't have to thank me. Just pay it forward when you can." Days turned into weeks, and Arthur's life continued to change. Jimmy didn't stop at temporary fixes. He wanted to give Arthur something permanent, something he could build on. A small apartment was found, fully furnished, stocked with everything Arthur needed to live comfortably. For the first time in years, he had a roof over his head. Then came the most important part, the opportunity to start fresh. Jimmy arranged a meeting with a local business owner who was looking for someone just like Arthur, a person who understood struggle, who was willing to work hard for a second chance. The job offer was a lifeline. Arthur could hardly believe it. "I don't know what to say," he stammered. "How can I ever repay you?" Jimmy placed a hand on his shoulder. "By helping someone else when you're able to. That's all I ask." Months passed, and Arthur settled into his new life, but he didn't forget the kindness that had been shown to him. He began volunteering at a local shelter, helping others who had once been in his shoes. His story, his transformation, was shared widely, inspiring others to act out of compassion. Jimmy's video documenting Arthur's journey went viral. The ripple effect was real. People from all walks of life began sharing their own acts of kindness, creating a global movement of hope and generosity. 1 year later, Jimmy and Arthur met again at a community event. The man who had once sat on the cold sidewalk, invisible to the world, now stood tall, his back straight and his face glowing with pride. Arthur was no longer the man who had lost everything. He was someone who had regained his sense of purpose, his place in the world. "You saved my life," Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion, tears streaming down his face. Jimmy shook his head, a soft chuckle escaping his lips. "No, Arthur, you saved your own life. I just gave you a little push." The crowd erupted in applause, but it wasn't just for Jimmy or Arthur. It was a celebration of the power of kindness, of how one simple act can change the course of someone's life and inspire a movement that spans across the globe. Moral of the story. The story of Arthur and Jimmy is a reminder that kindness is not just about giving material things. It's about giving hope, dignity, and the belief that someone can turn their life around. The ripple effect of one act of kindness can extend beyond what we can imagine, touching lives and creating waves of positive change. As Jimmy often says, "The world is full of good people, but it's up to us to find them and give them a chance." This story is a testament to that, showing how one person, no matter how small or broken they may feel, can rise again with the right support, compassion, and love. And in turn, they can pay it forward, creating an ever-growing cycle of kindness that has the power to transform the world.